Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be an episode standout once more for House of the Dragon Season 1 Episode 6 titled Princess and the Queen. Now there will be spoilers throughout this episode, so just beware when going into this overall video. Now I thought I'd continue with this episode as it's the most significant in that we jump massively forward in time, 10 years to be exact, and this is where we would see characters such as Rhaenyra and Alicent in their adult phases, now being played by actresses Oliva Cooke and Emily D'Arcy. Now this was again another great episode, both fascinating and at times, to be honest, slightly frustrating, as your head was literally spinning in just trying to keep up with all of the developments and changes. And whilst I've praised the show for continually pushing the story forward with no slow burn, I do feel perhaps that this jump might have been a bit too far. It probably would have been nice to have another interim episode 5 years after, and then we get the next episode where we get to this overall stage. But there was so much that went on during this episode, so we'll jump straight into it. And we started off with a very intense and unnerving scene of Rhaenyra giving childbirth, and this was very similar to what we saw in the first episode where we saw Viserys' first wife also trying to give birth. And Rhaenyra is far more frail and influential than what I'd imagined she'd be. When we look at the previous episode, she was far more confident and sure of herself, and I felt this was the trajectory that we would see going forward after this time jump. But it's clear here that even though her position is still the same, her status amongst others has been somewhat diminished. And overall, this was the third child that she'd had, and we noticed straight away that all of them are white skinned, which had raised and also confirmed suspicions to everybody minus Viserys, of course. And Alicent had summoned Rhaenyra straight away to verify the baby's identities, and she even pointed this out to Rhaenyra, stating that maybe they'll eventually get it right with a child that looks more like him. And now it's established by everybody, as I mentioned before, that the true father of Rhaenyra's kids is Sir Harwin Strong, and he was the son of the current Hand of the King. And I did question, why did Rhaenyra want to have so many children? Now I understand that throughout this entire series, everybody wants to give birth essentially to store as pawns in order to put themselves in the position to claim ownership over the throne. But she did state previously that she didn't want to give birth, and I can understand maybe having one child, but having 2 and 3 and so forth, I don't know, it just questions the overall motivation of where Rhaenyra is at. And of course, jumping forward in time, we didn't really get a chance to have any additional context regarding her motivation to having more children. We then look at Viserys, who's obviously looking extremely frail and aged. We see that he's lost his arm and his hand, and I did question letting him hold the baby in his weakened condition. And then later on we see a whole host of kids within the dungeons testing out the younger batch of dragons. And we had a very harsh scene where we see one of the dragons burning the goats, so this was typical Game of Thrones harsh reality and violence. But I have to say that the effects of all of the dragons throughout this episode was spot on yet again. We now see that Alicent herself also has 3 kids. The first being Aegon, who has grown into a teenager and very much has the same behavioural tendencies that what we've seen within Dameon. We see she has a younger son named Aemon and also a daughter named Helena. And this is where you really had to keep attention as to who were having all of these kids and all of the changes throughout the story. And the show itself really just expects you to go along with it without any extra exposition. And there's good and bad elements to that, and I think it will be interesting to see how viewers and fans react to these overall changes. The shift dynamics between Alicent and Rhaenyra is also fascinating. We see Alicent has clearly assumed a far more dominant status, not only over Viserys but also over the council. And she's extremely wary of any intentions that Rhaenyra has in terms of claiming the throne. And we see her emphasising this potential danger to both Aemon and Helena. We'll later on see Sir Criston, who has done a complete 180 on his feelings towards Rhaenyra. Again, some may criticise the lack of development here. Plus, Criston, I feel, should probably look a lot older. He practically looks the same as what he did in the previous episode, while others have aged considerably. So again, that's another criticism if you want to have of this particular episode. I also guess that we have to assume that Alicent ensured that he would be spared any punishment from killing Joffrey at Rhaenyra's and Lyanna's wedding. We kind of wonder what his role will be now going forward. Will he have to do some other tasks for Alicent? Will there be any further confrontation between him and Rhaenyra? We then had a great visual scene seeing Dameon and older Rhaenyra riding the dragons as they were based in Pentos. Now again, some can query as to why Dameon basically looks the same as what he did at the start of the series while everybody else has aged. And we also see that the two are now a couple, married themselves with 3 kids, all daughters, with a 4th one on the way. And we can also notice that all of them are black skinned, again confirming Rhaenyra's misdemeanors amongst everybody else. And both the couple even allude to this later on in a conversation. And this again throws major doubt over Viserys' credibility as to why he's the only one who seemingly doesn't know what's going on. And I think again we could have done with far more development in terms of the relationship between these two. And Dameon himself, if we look at as a character, has also done a complete 180. No longer, it seems, he wants to seek the throne or indeed battle or lust. He seems a far more mellowed character now, and it would have been nice to see that transition played out for far more longer. We then go back to the emerging rivalry, it seems, between Sir Criston and Sir Herwin, as we see them training the kids of both Alicent and Rhaenyra. And whilst this training, Criston goads Herwin, insinuating that he's the father of Rhaenyra's kids, and this enrages him to beat down Criston in a clear parallel of the beatdown that Criston gave Joffrey at Rhaenyra's and Lyanna's wedding. And this was a very critical event as it drew attention to Sir Herwin, arousing more gossip and suspicion, and the King's Hand, Lord Strong, is also aware of this potential revelation. And this is when he approaches Viserys, offering to resign his post and get his son away before his secret comes out. Now, Alicent was trying to be very tricky here and trying to get Lord Strong to confess, and by doing this, it would undercut Rhaenyra's claim to the throne. When Otto tried to bring the revelations to Viserys, he didn't believe him. But this time, if it had come from Lord Strong in relation to his son as well, I think Viserys would have believed it far more. But despite this, Viserys refuses his resignation, but still allows him to take his son away. We then have another very intense childbirth scene, this time with Lyanna, and like Viserys' first wife, Daemon has to make the ultimate choice between either saving the baby or saving her. And this again reaffirms the ongoing commentary throughout the entire series about women having to deal with the difficulties of giving birth. Now, Lyanna knows that she will not survive this experience, so we see her quickly walking outside, all blood all over her dress, and she walks out in front of the dragon Rhaenyra, speaking the word Dracarys, which we all know is instruction for the dragons to breathe fire. And the dragon was actually hesitating, so this again builds to the fact that the Targaryens can build a very personal connection to the dragons, and of course we saw that with Game of Thrones. But after hesitating for the while, the dragon eventually burns her, and this was a very surprising, as it now leaves Daemon as a single parent in charge of 3 daughters. And how will he cope with having to take care of them, whilst also eventually coming back into all of the potential discussions in terms of the position and the throne as well? Will this be another part of trying to redeem the character? Will we ever actually get to see them grow up, or will they meet their end in the next coming episodes? We then go back where we see Sir Erwin leaving as per his father's instruction. Rhaenyra also changes her mind and decides with Lyanna to leave. She realises that Alicent is now far too strong in their position, but will return at a later date. We also had the earlier scenes where we see that Rhaenyra's kids also come to the realisation that Sir Erwin is indeed their father. And then we closed out with the biggest revelation, where we saw that Lord Strong and Sir Erwin are burnt to the ground in their castle, and that this whole event was instigated by Lord Larys, their brother, who we saw in the earlier scene releasing prisoners in order to get them to do his bidding, and in a way of making sure that they would not speak out against this, he cut out their tongues in a very gruesome scene typical of the violence that we normally associate with Game of Thrones. And he was completely remorseless in his accounting of the event to Alicent, and I'm guessing that he felt left out by both his brother and his father. And again, this is another element where we could have been given far more context into his overall motivation. But what this does is clearly show Alicent's intent. Now, even though she states she didn't want it to go that far, I believe what her original plan was to out the secret of Rhaenyra and her affair with Sir Erwin to undermine her credibility and her claim to the throne. So even if she didn't intend to kill anybody, she still made that initial power play, and by doing this, it kind of eliminates any potential obstacle whenever she wants her kids to eventually claim the throne, because if Sir Erwin is the father to Rhaenyra's children, then he could have some sort of claim to the overall succession as well. And it was a great monologue scene by Lord Varys, Again, harking back to those Game of Thrones earlier seasons where we've talked very much more about the manipulations and the backstabbing, and it was a terrific way to end the episode, which overall was another great installment of the show. I think all round, all of the actors performed brilliantly. And we do have to reference, of course, the actors Oliva Cooke and Emily D'Arcy. And the big concern was, following the departures of the younger actresses, would these older actresses be able to carry on the good work that was carried on by the previous actresses? And I have to say they did this completely. For the most part, you completely believe that these were the older versions of the characters that we had seen previously. I especially have to draw reference to Oliva Cooke, who completely looked like an older version of Alicent. Now, Emily D'Arcy didn't perhaps have quite the same similarities as what we saw with Millie Alcock, but still she performed very well. And again, I think both of the actresses were very convincing in their overall roles, and I think the show now is in good hands for the rest of the entire season. And just to quickly comment on the trailer for the upcoming 7th episode, we will see the return of Otto, and I was wondering throughout this episode what happened to him. It seems that he clearly still has a lot of influence over Alicent's thinking. Maybe he has been giving her much more advice in the background, and this is one of the reasons why she's been able to assert so much dominance in the upcoming years. It also looks like we'll see some sort of major confrontation between Alicent and Rhaenyra. Again, this is probably something that is building up all the way through to the likely season finale of the show. And as I mentioned before, there will be some stage when Rhaenyra comes back to try and claim a stronger claim on the throne. So overall, I'm absolutely loving the show. Again, the time jumps are a bit jarring, and maybe perhaps they took one step too far in terms of the overall timeline. But still, overall, everything is making sense. All of the characters are very interesting and complex. It's very much keeping that same bleak, realistic style and tone as what we've seen with Game of Thrones. And the story is absolutely compelling. And it seems that most fans, whether they're old or new, are completely enjoying the show. And like me, they can't wait to see where the story and the direction takes place next. So those are my overall thoughts and feelings on the 6th episode of House of the Dragon, another standout episode. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you'd like to see me review the rest of the episodes going forward, let me know in the comments. And of course, I will provide a season review when the show comes to its end. But do you think this is in many ways matching or even surpassing the first season of Game of Thrones? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, many people draw comparisons to Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, and I think it's clear to even the most ardent supporter of that show that right now House of the Dragon is clearly the superior show. But let me know what you think in the comments, and if you have any other shows or television series or movies or any other topics that you'd like to see me cover, then let me know in the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary on you within the channel within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.